I bet you've never heard of the legendary oasis of Zerzura. This ancient city is said to be hidden somewhere deep in the Sahara Desert, and its discovery could mean unimaginable riches and untold secrets. According to an anonymous 15th century Arabic guide, the key to unlocking the city lies in the beak of a bird carved on the city gate. Zerzura might not be as popular as Machu Picchu or the pyramids, but that just makes it more mysterious. Legend has it that Zerzura is built around this big oasis somewhere in the desert west of the Nile. Apparently, it's made out of white stone and has all these luxurious houses and gold decorations. The story goes that a scribe wrote down the account of a traveler who stumbled upon Zerzura while looking for his lost camel. At one point in his journey, the man got caught up in a sandstorm, where he got separated from the rest of his group. The traveler kept wandering in the desert for days, and then, out of nowhere, two men showed up and guided him to the city of Zerzura. The traveler described this city as an oasis filled with little birds and made out of pure white stonework. The city is also said to be guarded by giants. In 1835, an English Egyptologist named John Gardner Wilkinson mentioned the city in one of his books. He spoke to a man from Egypt who found the city by accident after days of wandering through the desert. He mentioned some ruins, unusual stonework, and a large oasis surrounded by palm trees. The man even gave some instructions on how the city could be found, indicating that it might be in the western desert of Egypt. But here's the kicker. Even though a group of explorers went out to find Zerzura, they didn't succeed. At the same time, they did stumble upon a bunch of previously unknown oases. In the early 1900s, numerous expeditions were sent to find the city, including one with a fleet of Ford Model A trucks. But, alas, none were successful. Others say Zerzura did exist at one point, but not anymore. It's possible it was swallowed by the desert. It's believed that back in the day, the Sahara Desert was actually green. Scientists even found traces of ancient rivers that flowed through the area 100,000 years ago, creating green corridors across the desert. But Zerzura might have never been real to begin with. Maybe it only existed in the minds of people, a figment of their imagination as they were struggling in the African desert. For thousands of years, people have been obsessed with the hunt for another lost city, Atlantis. But if this place really existed, where on Earth, or under the sea, could it be? According to Plato, Atlantis was an actual place, and it was supposedly located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Strait of Gibraltar. But how did this mythical city become synonymous with a perfect, paradise-like society? Well, you can thank Ignatius Donnelly for that. The American writer published a book in 1882 where he outlined 13 hypotheses about the existence of Atlantis. Donnelly truly believed that this lost city was where ancient humans lived in peace and joy for centuries. Donnelly even thought that Atlantis was the original source of many ancient civilizations around the world. And if we just followed Plato's clues, we could totally find Atlantis. Sounds like a treasure hunt, right? What inspired Donnelly to go on this quest in the first place, you might ask? Apparently, an amateur archaeologist discovered the city of Troy, using Homer's The Iliad as a guide. Well, if Troy was real, then why not Atlantis? Back in the day, some people believed that America was the legendary Atlantis. Columbus really stirred up some excitement when he brought back news about the New World to Europe. But the real hunt for Atlantis didn't really start until the 20th and 21st centuries. Some people tried to connect the dots between a volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini and the destruction of Minoan settlements. But in 2018, a team of investigators claimed they had nailed it, announcing they had discovered concrete proof that Atlantis had existed. What was their evidence, you ask? A series of mysterious circles in a national park in Spain. But the circles turned out to be nothing more than experimental ponds for studying zooplankton. Let's face it, there's no real evidence that Plato's lost city of Atlantis actually existed. But it doesn't make searching for it any less exciting, does it? The Fountain of Youth isn't a lost city per se, but it is another mythical location that many have claimed to have stumbled upon over the years. Long ago, people were obsessed with the idea of living forever, or at least extending their lives as much as possible. Each culture had its own wild story, like the Greeks talking about a magic fountain that let people live longer, or Alexander the Great finding a river of paradise that could heal the wounded. Japanese legends spoke of hot springs that could make you young again, while the Caribbean locals talked about the restorative powers of the water in one of their own mystical lands. Explorers searched far and wide for these magical waters, but nothing. Probably the most famous of all was the story of the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon, who thought he'd found it in Florida. Now, Ponce de Leon was quite a character. He sailed with Columbus and became an important figure in the area now known as the Dominican Republic. He found gold in Puerto Rico and even became the island's administrator. But when the ruler of Spain decided to replace him in his duties, he got upset and decided to explore Florida, looking for gold and the elusive Fountain of Youth. He explored the Bahamas, but sadly, he didn't find any gold or magic water. He did, however, make his way to Florida. He explored the coast and even discovered the Gulf Stream. Unfortunately, his last expedition didn't go well, and he was wounded. But the legend of him searching for the Fountain of Youth lived on. Even though historians don't think he was really looking for the Fountain of Youth, thousands of people visit the Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park every year to try the sulfur-smelling water. It's the oldest attraction in Florida, which has been around since the 17th century. Some say the water has unusual properties, but I'll leave that up to you to decide after you visit this place. Norse mythology has its own mysterious land called Thule. It's said to be somewhere between Scandinavia and Iceland, where the sun barely shines and the cold bites hard. The folks there survive on a diet of millet, herbs, fruits, and roots, washed down with a grain and honey brew. As for its exact location, scholars can't seem to agree on it to this day. The legendary ancient Greek explorer Pytheas was said to be the first to stumble upon Thule during his quest for tin mines. He sailed his way up north, passing by Scotland, and after 6 long days of sailing, he reached Thule. The people there, according to Pytheas, were quite primitive, but that's no surprise since they were just simple farmers living off the land. They showed Pytheas where the sun set on the shortest day of the year. They also told him that in winter, the sun never rose at all, and in summer, there was no night. For many years, historians have been debating the true identity of this mythical land of Thule. Some say it's Iceland, while others claim it's Norway. A little bit of progress has been made recently with the help of a team of researchers. If their findings are correct, Thule might be the elusive island of Smola. That's farther south than any of the Norwegian islands that were on the list of contenders. It may be too soon to celebrate, but it does look like Thule has finally been found.
Eridu, a megacity older than the first known civilization and older than the pyramids of Giza, was buried in the sands of the Mesopotamian desert for over 2,000 years. Now, scientists have made a discovery that changes what we know about the ancient city. They found over 4,000 canals around Eridu that brought water to more than 700 farms where people worked between the 6th and the early 1st millennium BCE. Now, Eridu was founded around 5400 BCE and was the city of the first kings and history's first city according to the Sumerian king list, an ancient text on a clay tablet. Ancient Sumerians believed that deities created this city when they decided to settle on Earth. Eridu plays such a big role in Sumerian myths and legends that, at some point, people used to think it was just a mythical location. The most famous Eridu myth says that the skies got angry because humans were too noisy, so they decided to send a great flood to wipe them out. A new study showed that the Euphrates River served as the source of water for the entire city. The researchers mapped what remains of the ancient landscape and found a well-developed network of artificial irrigation canals. They discovered 200 large main canals pulling water from the Euphrates, and those canals fed another 4,000 smaller canals. The team used everything from satellite images and drone footage to soil analysis, old records, and remote sizing tech to map out the area. The 700 farms that used the water from the system were different in size, from about 5,000 square feet to over 200,000 square feet. The main canals were a little over a half-mile long, and some stretched more than 5 miles. The smaller canals could be as short as 32 feet. Rivers in Mesopotamia were the main water sources for farming, so ancient farmers had to learn how to guide water from the river to their fields. It all started with simple methods, like digging small canals, but over generations, they learned how to build massive canals up to 62 miles long. The Euphrates itself helped the farmers. Water was moving thanks to gravity down its elevated riverbanks, and natural breaks in the banks let it spill onto the land. Researchers aren't sure when each canal was in use, and it's unlikely that all 4,200 canals were active at the same time during that long period. Now, Eridu used to be an important religious and trade center because of its strategic location on the Persian Gulf. Its economy mostly had to do with fishing, thanks to the Euphrates River. Researchers found fishing nets and weights and whole bales of dried fish at the site. And there were even models of reed boats, the earliest physical evidence we have for constructed boats anywhere. The city was thriving until people abandoned it around the year 600 BCE, and scientists still aren't sure why they did it. The local residents, plus the visiting pilgrims and merchants, had just exhausted all the resources of the land. They had to let it rest several times before abandoning the city for good. It happened when the Euphrates changed its course, and they lost their main source of water. Now, many centuries later, in 1854, a British official was on a mission to this area to check out a remote place that had a bunch of mounds called tells, which are piles of debris left behind by ancient human settlements. At first, Taylor wasn't impressed. He had been hoping to find something big, maybe statues, ancient writing, or ruins of palaces and temples. But with the brief time he had, all he found were things like walls, drains, stone platforms, and pieces of limestone columns decorated with tiny mosaic cones. But he didn't know that these boring mounds were hiding one of the oldest cities on Earth, Eridu. The people at the British Museum got interested in the finding, but the first full-scale excavations took place here only around a century later. The local Iraqi authorities got really interested in the excavations as they were hoping to find more about the earliest days of Mesopotamian history. So they focused on Mound 1, a massive tell as tall as an 8-story building. Soon they uncovered part of an unfinished step pyramid from the end of the 3rd millennium BCE. As they dug deeper, they found layers of human life going back in time. There were levels from the Uruk period, and even remains from a time before the Sumerians called Proto-history. In those lower layers, they discovered multiple rebuilds of the Temple of Enki, the city's main deity. People rebuilt this temple again and again for over 2,000 years. Every time the temple collapsed, they built a new one right on top. Each new version of the temple was bigger and more impressive than the last. From the middle of the 4th millennium BCE, these temple buildings became massive, more advanced than anything else humans had built up to that point. The city in Eridu was also becoming more complex, with clear social classes. Eventually, they stopped rebuilding the temple and put up a step pyramid on top of the ruins. Even though Eridu faded, it likely stayed important as a religious site. Archaeologists found pottery from the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE during excavations, although there were no signs of houses. The Sumerians were an innovative civilization, as you can tell. By 1500 BCE, they invented the cedar plow, a tool that let farmers plow and plant seeds at the same time, using animals like oxen to pull it. This gear even came with instructions. The Sumerian Farmer's Almanac gave farmers advice on how to grow more crops with proper tilling and irrigation. These smart farming tricks helped feed more people, which led to larger cities, an organized ruling system, and more focus on religion. And as their cities expanded, so did their work in writing, math, and spiritual life. 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians had already produced cuneiform, one of the first writing systems in history. So another recent find from the same part of the world proves that bureaucracy existed already 4,000 years ago. Archaeologists found ancient administrative tablets in another ancient Sumerian city. These clay tablets are the oldest solid proof we have of the world's first empire, the Akkadian Empire. The tablets were inside a state archive building made of mud bricks, which had different rooms that acted like offices. Now, before this discovery, archaeologists didn't really understand how the first known empire in the world, the Akkadian Empire, worked behind the scenes. But now, thanks to the recent Gerso excavations, we have the first real and unambiguous evidence of the empire's administrative system. They tracked everything – deliveries, spending, and inventory, from fish to sheep to grains, fabric, and even gems. The tablets also include population records, with names and jobs of men, women, and kids, an ancient version of a census. From these records, scientists found out that women played a key role in Akkadian society. Some women had powerful positions, like high priestesses. The tablets also show a wide range of jobs, from skilled workers like stonecutters to people with simpler roles like temple floor sweepers. Some even included building blueprints, field layouts, and canal maps, proving that the empire had serious organization and planning. Eventually, the city rebelled and gained its independence, and the Akkadian Empire's 150-year rule ended. Now, researchers are carefully cleaning and translating the tablets to fully understand what they say. These new finds will replace older, incomplete ideas about the empire and give us a way more accurate picture of how Akkadian power and the ruling system actually worked.
They finally did it. After 300 years of searching, archaeologists pinned down the location of the lost land of the white jaguar, the city of Maya hidden in the wild jungles of Mexico. It all kicked off back in the 1500s with the Lacandon Maya. These guys were some super tough survivors who just didn't quit. When their main capital, Neptune, fell to the Spanish in 1586, most people would have called it game over. But not the Lacandon. Nope, they packed up, headed deeper into the rainforest, and built their last stronghold, Sakbalan. It was a hidden fortress of stone temples, twisty jungle trails, and howler monkeys acting like noisy little guards. For over 100 years, the Lacandon managed to keep their traditions alive there, far from European control. Then, in 1695, history came crashing in. A Spanish friar named Diego de Ribas stumbled into Sakbalan. And yeah, that was basically the beginning of the end. Soon after, the Spanish took over. By 1721, the Maya had abandoned Sakbalan. The jungle didn't waste time. It swallowed the place whole, with roots tearing into walls and vines smothering plazas. The city didn't just disappear, it got eaten alive. For the next 300 years, Sakbalan turned into more of a myth than a memory. A name archaeologists and explorers would whisper, secretly hoping to find it one day. Plenty of expeditions tried to track it down, but the rainforest is sneaky. Every path looks identical, maps fall apart in the humidity, and even GPS can't cut through the thick green ceiling. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was alive, covered in thorns. And yeah, crawling with jaguars that would happily make you lunch. So how did the scientists crack the mystery? One word: a letter from the 17th century. The letter by Diego de Ribas described all the routes, rivers, and trails leading to Sacbalan. It showed in every detail the journey of the soldiers who walked 4 days to the Lacuntun River after leaving Sacbalan. Then they sailed for 2 days and arrived at the church El Encuentro de Cristo, left their canoes, and continued on foot to Lake Petén Itzá in Guatemala. This was already detailed enough, but the scientists needed to pinpoint the exact location with geographic information systems. They took into account vegetation layers and how much each person was carrying to map an approximate range where Sacbalan should be. They fed this information to GIS and calculated where the city should be. And bingo, it worked. Archaeologists traveled through the jungle and found stone temples rising like broken teeth from the earth. There were also some tools and ceramics, and a Spanish church right in the middle of the ruins. The discovery isn't just about cool ruins, it rewrites history. For decades, people assumed the Lacandons simply scattered after Lacamtun fell, but Sacbalan proves they regrouped, fought, and preserved their culture for over a century more. It's like discovering the final chapter of a book we thought ended too soon. There's also irony here. The Spanish friar who revealed Sacbalan helped doom it. Yet his letter, centuries later, also helped save its memory. Today, the ruins sit inside a biosphere reserve, protected by the same jungle that once hid them. Tourists can't just waltz in. It's raw, tangled, alive. The city breathes again, but on its own terms. Scientists just uncovered another lost city, buried under the thick jungles of Mexico. It had been hiding there for 600 years. The place is called Gengola, and it's massive, about 360 hectares with more than 1,100 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, its own network of roads, and a super organized city plan. Because it was so deep in the jungle, you'd never realize how huge it really was unless you spent years hiking through it. But modern tech swooped in to save the day, using LiDAR, a kind of laser scanning tool. Researchers flew over the site, and in just 2 hours, they had a full 3D map of the entire city. Gengola was built sometime between 1350 and 1521, back in pre-Columbian times, and it used to be buzzing with life. It was a major hub for the Zapotec people, who had been around in the region since about 600 BCE. Families there lived in homes with big central patios surrounded by rooms, and as they got new members, they just add more rooms and stretch their houses out. They even used the mountains around them as natural walls and channeled mountain water for drainage. A lot of their buildings are still standing, which is wild considering how much time has passed. By the late 1400s, the Zapotec were real powerhouses along the Pacific coast. They even fought off the Aztecs, who were constantly trying to expand. At Gengola, they survived a brutal 7-month siege. But even though hiding in the mountains kept them safe, it wasn't perfect. They didn't have enough fresh water or farmland to feed everyone. Just 12 miles away, the smaller city of Tehuantepec had what they needed. So the Zapotec moved there right before the Spanish arrived in 1521. What the scientists have seen so far is just scratching the surface. That LiDAR scan revealed more than 1,000 buildings, and archaeologists are planning years of research to figure it all out. Instead of digging everything up and risking damage, they'll use advanced scanning tech to keep studying the city safely. Alright, now let's hop across the world to Egypt, where archaeologists stumbled on a whole lost city called Imet, tucked away in the eastern Nile Delta. The place was buried under layers of mud, water, and time, hiding in a swamp that's been shifting and changing for thousands of years. Scientists first noticed it from way up high in faint little clusters of mud brick foundations in satellite images. The shapes looked shaky and ghost-like, but too neat to be natural. So they followed the patterns down on the ground, started digging, and the city started coming back to life. They found multi-story tower houses, basically mini skyscrapers of the ancient world. They had multiple floors, thick foundations, and could handle some serious weight. That kind of vertical living is super rare in Egypt, especially outside the Nile Delta. It showed that people in Emet weren't just spreading across the land, but stacking upward, which means the city was packed, carefully planned, and way more urban than anyone thought for that time. And it wasn't just fancy housing either. Archaeologists also uncovered a grain processing center with paved work areas, animal pens, and organized spaces for food production. Clearly, this was a city with a real economy running behind it. Not far from there, they spotted a ceremonial road that once led to a temple for Wadjet, Emet's patron deity. But later on, other buildings got plunked down over the road, which shows that Wadjet's worship faded over time. Still, the ruins coughed up some amazing relics, a green faience little funerary figurine, and a stela showing Harpocrates perched on crocodiles and gripping snakes. He was the Greek spin on Horus, deity of silence, secrets, and the newborn sun. And there was even a bronze sistrum, an ancient Egyptian musical instrument decorated with twin heads of Hathor. Turns out, Emet was active from around the 4th century BCE onward, stretching from Egypt's late period into the Roman era. Its location along trade routes made it a magnet for merchants and pilgrims visiting Wadjet's temple. So it wasn't just hanging on, it was thriving, connecting, trading, and adapting with the times. And this isn't just another dusty ruin. Emet is giving us a window into everyday life, religion, and urban planning in the Delta, which we've always known way less about compared to the big pyramids and tombs. Clouds of blazing ash obscure the sun. The ground is shaking. People are running in different directions. A volcanic eruption has begun. And it started suddenly. A small, sunny coastal town is facing one of the most devastating natural disasters. The ash will settle. Lava will spill out of the volcano's mouth. And within a few hours, the ancient city of Pompeii will be in… Wait a minute! People get into cars and drive away. This is not Pompeii. This is a modern town. Huh? Is it possible for a city to get buried during an eruption today? Unfortunately, yes. Welcome to Montserrat, which is also called the Pompeii of the Caribbean. Montserrat is not a city. This is the British Overseas Territory in the Lesser Antilles, one of the Caribbean islands. It has the Soufriere Hills volcano that turned the lives of many residents of the capital, Plymouth, into a nightmare in 1995. But what kind of place is this, and why do people live here at all? The Montserrat area is not very big. It's about 6 times smaller than the Chicago area, and there aren't many people living here. Before 1995, the population of Montserrat was about 15,000 inhabitants. It's not a lot, but the island gathered several different cultures, as it was inhabited by the Irish, Africans, and indigenous people. Montserrat is one of the youngest volcanic islands of the Lesser Antilles. Before 1995, the Soufriere Hills volcano erupted here in the 17th century. Many years had passed since then, so people were not very worried about its new awakening. They rested, worked, had fun, went boating to other islands, and all this continued for about 300 years. Then, the serene paradise life ended. In 1995, seismic activity began. It continued for several months and led to an explosive eruption in 1996. Fortunately, no one got hurt, but the real disaster hit in June 1997. Something bad started happening at the top of the Soufriere Hills. At an altitude of about 3,000 feet, the volcano began spitting out ash clouds, rocks, and hot gas, releasing its boiling innards, which were rapidly falling down the steep slope. The locals were terrified. Some people had evacuated from the island by that time. They had to leave their homes and sail away, but some locals stayed and didn't survive. The pyroclastic flow destroyed many buildings, streets, and roads. In case you didn't know, the pyroclastic flow is a dense, thick mix of volcanic ash, lava, and hot gases that moves as an incandescent mass at high speed. It burns and destroys everything in its path. On that day, the pyroclastic flow was moving at 62 miles per hour, with its temperature reaching around 1470 degrees Fahrenheit. Imagine boiling water. Pretty hot, isn't it? And the temperature of that pyroclastic flow was almost 7 times higher. One part of the inhabitants of the island moved to its northern part, and the other migrated to the neighboring islands. Since then, Plymouth has become a ghost town. Thanks to the solidified magma, you can see buildings that seem to have particularly sunk through the ground or are stuck in textures. The streets are deserted, and the roads are covered with a thick layer of volcanic mass. After the eruption, only 1,000 people stayed on the island. There are about 4,500 people living there now, all of them in the northern, safe part. The southern side of the island is now called the exclusion zone. It's divided into 5 parts: A, B, C, F, and V, the most dangerous area. Why is it dangerous? Because the volcano is still active. Periodically, it spits out clouds of ash. It can erupt with devastating force at any moment, but that doesn't stop thrill seekers. Montserrat attracts many tourists who like to walk in the picturesque areas near the active volcano. People also love the ghost town. The roofs of houses, spires, and the remains of the clock tower stick out of the solidified lava. Broken windows with torn curtains and dilapidated former hotels attract many tourists. You can enjoy the beautiful tropical northern part of the island and see the apocalyptic picture in its southern part. Locals actively promote tourism and advertise their home as the Pompeii of the Caribbean. Would you like to visit this place? Living next to a volcano is quite risky, but how about living inside a volcano? Near 220 miles south of Tokyo, there's a beautiful island of Aogashima, most of which is occupied by an active volcano. But how can people live inside a volcano and not be afraid? The answer is simple. This place is too beautiful. Besides, the last major eruption occurred there at the end of the 18th century. People don't live right inside the crater, that would be too much. A small settlement is located inside the outer wall of the crater, far from the geothermal activity and quite far from the dangerous peak. But it's still a pretty extreme place to call home. The population of the island is about 170 people, and they're not going to leave. Here you can find only one shop, one post office, free camping, and a couple of guest houses and 3 bars. It sounds pretty cozy considering that all this is located in a green paradise. But in 1785, this paradise resembled Pompeii during the infamous catastrophe. According to stories and remaining records, the first tremors occurred on May 18 or so. It was a warning of the impending disaster. At that time, 327 residents lived in Aogashima. It's not known whether they attached importance to the small earthquake, but they continued to live peacefully for another couple of weeks. The volcano's activity increased. The disaster was inevitable, so evacuation from the island began on June 4. Unfortunately, it was too late. There were earthquakes, terrible roars, and streams of hot lava that covered trees, roads, and houses. Many didn't survive that day. And still, the descendants of those who escaped from the island that day now reside in Aogashima. Aren't they afraid of another eruption? They look at this situation differently. Nothing can stop nature, so there's no point in resisting. And if there's no eruption, then it's better to enjoy the picturesque views and the relaxed rhythm of the island. Few people live there, and there's almost no urban entertainment, but still, you can find what to do. In the afternoon, you can walk along the Green Mountain Range and enjoy the view of the Philippine Sea. You will feel one with nature, beautiful birds, the warm sun, and the physical exertion of the trip. It will all charge you with energy and inspiration. You can also go fishing, camping, or chat with the locals. At night, you can look at the stars. The night sky is perfect in Aogashima. Away from city lights, there's a low level of light pollution. A detailed star map can help you study celestial bodies without a telescope. Since the place is essentially an active volcano, you can find many geothermal springs there. One of the coolest and most popular places to visit is Aogashima Furiai. It's a sauna that uses volcanic energy to maintain high temperatures in the steam rooms. And outside the rooms, you can also find hot air vents for cooking. How about an omelet fried in volcanic heat? Sounds appealing. Of course, it's quite difficult to get to this place since Aogashima is a very remote island. You first need to get to the nearest larger island, Hachichojima. There are regular flights to it directly from Tokyo. You can also choose a more romantic trip and take an overnight ferry. It's only 2.5 hours by boat between Hachichojima and Aogashima. But if you've spent enough money, you can pay for a helicopter trip and spend a mere 20 minutes to get there. It wouldn't be surprising if you wanted to stay on the island forever after visiting it for the first time. A measured life in nature or the bustle of the concrete jungle? Which one would you choose? But don't forget that at any moment you can feel the ground tremble. But let's hope there won't be any eruptions soon. Archaeologists just found the remains of a lost city from thousands of years ago, hiding in southeastern Europe. They were sure that it was nothing more than an old defense outpost, but new digs are changing that big time. They now believe the site might actually be the lost capital of an ancient kingdom of Lynkestis that has to do with Alexander the Great, the man who changed history. The ruins are near a small village called Cernobuki in North Macedonia. You can find mentions of them from 1966, but nobody really dug into them until about 15 years ago. At first, they found just a few ruins and thought it was a guard post used to spot Romans coming from the west. But now, a team of scientists went back with high-tech equipment and found proof this place wasn't just a tiny outpost. Researchers managed to look under the ground and found that the Acropolis the ruins sit on, which is a flat hilltop, has enough rooms and infrastructure to host a full-on city inside the fortress walls. It covers about 2.8 hectares and around 10,000 people lived here at its peak. Researchers also found a textile workshop and plenty of artifacts, including a coin from the time of Alexander the Great and with his image, axes, game pieces, and an oil lamp, and even a small ceramic with a heart motif. One of the coolest finds is a reusable clay theater ticket, which was unique to North Macedonia. This means there was also most likely a theater here, and it could be in one of the large buildings. Experts used to think that the city was from the time of King Philip V, but now, thanks to the coin and especially the ancient tools and broken pottery that were found, they believe people might have lived there during the Bronze Age. Lynkestis and the rest of Upper Macedonia had some pretty intense weather with freezing, rainy winters, and super hot summers. Life there wasn't easy, and most of the time, it was all about surviving. The people who lived in the area were mostly nomadic herders, and they had to move around depending on the season. They traveled with their flocks of cattle, goats, and sheep, always looking for the best pasture lands. Back then, Macedonia was kind of like the outsider of the Greek world. It was part Greek, but powerful city-states like Athens and Sparta didn't really accept it. Thanks to this position on the edge, Macedonia had the chance to mix Greek traditions with local culture. Eventually, they took over and changed the whole ancient world under kings like Philip II and Alexander the Great. The new discoveries at Cernobuki show us how connected and powerful ancient Macedonia really was, especially since the city sat along trade routes to Constantinople. Big historical figures like Octavian and Agrippa might have passed through the area on their way to clash with Cleopatra and Mark Antony. The place could also be the lost capital of the ancient kingdom of Lynkestis or Lyncus. Some experts think that a major city in Upper Macedonia could be where Queen Eurydice was born. That powerful lady gave birth to Philip II of Macedon, who took over Lynkestis in the 4th century BCE. The kingdom of Macedon became independent, and thanks to it, the son of Philip II, Alexander the Great, later became the king of the Macedonian Empire. That man totally lived up to his name. In just 13 years, he created one of the biggest empires in history, stretching from Greece all the way to Egypt and India. And he managed to do all that before passing away at just 32 years old. Researchers plan to dig deeper into this important site to learn more about the early civilizations of Europe. This incredible discovery was possible thanks to LiDAR. This remote sensing tool helps map things like how tall plants are, how thick forests are, and other details across big areas. LiDAR is an active system, meaning it creates its own energy, in this case light, to scan the ground. A laser fires super fast pulses of light that shoot down to the ground and bounce off things like buildings and tree branches. The LiDAR sensor then catches the reflected light and records it. The system measures how long it takes for the light to go from the laser to the ground and back. This is called the two-way travel time. That time helps figure out the distance the light traveled. Then, using that distance, the system can figure out the exact elevation of different spots. Scientists recently found another lost city using the same technology. This one, called Giangola, was hiding beneath the dense jungles of Mexico for 600 years. All this time, researchers believed there was just an abandoned fortress there. There was no way to go and see until recently, when they used LiDAR and got a 3D model of the area in just 2 hours from a plane. Giangola was built in pre-Columbian times between the years 1350 and 1521. It covered 360 hectares and had over 1,100 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, and a whole network of internal roads. The city had a well-planned urban layout with temples and ball courts and separate neighborhoods for the elites and commoners. It was a crucially important place for the Zapotec people, a group that had lived in the area since around 600 BCE. In Giangola, families lived together in homes with big patios in the middle, surrounded by rooms. As families grew bigger, they would add more rooms and expand their homes. Since Giangola was surrounded by mountains, the locals tried to use every piece of land on the slopes that was good enough to build a house. They even used natural drainage of the area to have water, and they must have been great at construction, as many of their constructions are still standing today. But at some point in the beginning of the 16th century, they didn't have enough fresh water and good farmland to grow food, and moved away to nearby Tehuantepec. Archaeologists plan to learn more about how the Zapotecs were organized, how they ruled their cities, and how they interacted with the Spanish when they arrived. They plan to study all 1,170 buildings found in the LiDAR scan, and it'll take a few years. Another recent find, made with the same groundbreaking tech, is a massive city that lay hidden beneath the thick green canopy of the Amazon rainforest. A whole network of houses, plazas, roads, and canals was hiding in the shadow of a mighty volcano. Many scientists thought that ancient Amazonian people lived in tiny huts and cleared patches of land to survive. But this city, built 2,500 years ago and inhabited for nearly 1,000 years, debunked that theory and changed everything. Now, researchers think tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people lived in complex urban societies. They scanned the area and found that 6,000 rectangular platforms, each about 66 by 33 feet and 6 to 9 feet high. These structures were arranged in clusters around central plazas that had straight roads with perfect right angles and paths connecting them. One of the roads was an impressive 16 miles long. Building straight roads like this is way harder than just going with the landscape. Some of these roads may have had great spiritual or ceremonial significance. The civilization was thriving thanks to rich soil from a nearby volcano. But the same volcano may have also led to its downfall. Researchers also found signs of threats to the cities, such as ditches that blocked entrances to the settlements. Maybe some people living nearby were trying to get in. The next step for the scientists will be to study the adjoining 116 square miles to know more about this large, complex society that could be bigger than the well-known Mayan cities in Mexico and Central America. For over 3,000 years, no one knew this place even existed. And then, out of nowhere, archaeologists digging near Alexandria uncovered something absolutely shocking: a forgotten Egyptian city. This place is buried under Greek ruins, hiding secrets that could rewrite the history of pharaohs and their armies. And one of the artifacts, which looks like a simple wine jug, changed everything. We thought that we already placed all the important parts on the map of ancient Egypt: pyramids, Thebes, Luxor, Alexandria. But nope, the map just got an update. The new city was a big deal, and it's about 3,400 years old. It's just been discovered at the site called Kom el Nugus. This place is located west of Alexandria and tucked between the Mediterranean and a saltwater lake called Lake Mariut. This discovery raised a few eyebrows. Scientists thought that this place used to be empty and that it was only settled by the Greeks in about 332 BCE. But it turns out that people lived in Kom el Nugus way before that. When archaeologists were digging through Greek ruins, they started noticing something unexpected: mud brick walls. Yep, you know, the pyramid type. That's the kind Egyptians built during the New Kingdom. These mud bricks were made from mud, clay, sand, and straw. These ingredients were mixed with water and dried in the sun, not baked. Egyptians used them for thousands of years to build houses, temples, palaces, and yes, the pyramids. Of course, other civilizations did use mud brick too, but Egyptian mud brick is kinda quirky. They used straw that grew in their regions, layout styles, and mortar. That's what helped the experts realize that Egyptians used to hang out in Kom el Nugus. That alone raised eyebrows, and then they found more. An entire street layout, buried structures, and even a temple built by Ramses the Great himself. His name speaks for itself. This guy was one of the most famous pharaohs in all of Egyptian history. He ruled ancient Egypt for 60 years, fought huge battles, and just loved building tons of stuff like that temple. People loved him so much that later pharaohs literally pretended to be him or wrote his name on their buildings. That's when archaeologists realized that they weren't looking at some dusty mud bricks of a tiny village. That's an entire buried city. They immediately started digging more. Turns out the whole place wasn't random. It was built with great care. The streets had drains to stop rainwater from damaging the soft mud brick walls. There were also small tomb chapels with writings about soldiers. This suggests this place might have been the military base, and that changes a lot. In ancient Egypt, when the military showed up, there must have been a reason. So what was it? Protection? Conquest? Control of something important? In the case of this city, it was probably about wine, water, and trade on the edge of the desert. What's even crazier is that we still don't know just how big it was. The team has only uncovered part of it so far. There could be fortifications, warehouses, administrative buildings, or even more religious or royal structures waiting underground. We also don't know what this town was called in ancient times. That name is still buried. But it might be uncovered someday, maybe inside a wall, maybe on a scroll, maybe on another broken jug. One of those already turned out to be a mind-blower. A chunk of a ceramic jar, called an amphora, had a royal seal pressed into it, and that seal bore the name Meredaton. Princess Meredaton wasn't just anyone. She was the eldest daughter of Queen Nefertiti and the older sister of King Tutankhamun. Yes, that's right. Both Nefertiti and King Tut were involved here. all that was about a century before Ramses the Great built one of his temples here. Looks like the city was founded back in the days of another pharaoh, the pharaoh Akhenaten, husband of Queen Nefertiti, father of Princess Meritatan, and future king Tutankhamun. That guy, Akhenaten, was a bit of a wild card. He was the type who really gets weird about one of his interests. He tried to completely change Egypt's religion, forcing everyone to worship the sun disk called Aten instead of the usual deities. He basically told all Egypt that all their mythology was wrong, and from now on, there will be no more Osiris, no more Thoth or Set. Just raw sunlight only, people. That's known in history as the Amarna period. And he went all in, changed his name, built an entirely new capital city called Amarna in the middle of the desert, redesigned temples, rewrote hymns, and even banned traditional religious imagery. Even the art got wild at the time. People started getting elongated heads, belly rolls, and all that humanity and vulnerability carved into stone. It was deliberately weird. He wanted to show the family not as perfect gods, but as human vessels of divine light. Everyone had to awkwardly smile and play along because he was the pharaoh after all. The wackiest part is that after his rule, his son, Tutankhamun, reversed all the sun disk-related stuff. He literally changed his name from Tutankhaten, which means living image of the Aten, the sun disk, to Tutankhamun, which means living image of Amun, one of the great older deities. King Tut brought back the old deities, reopened the temples, and erased as much of Akhenaten's legacy as possible. Looks like his family didn't really like the sun cult after all. Meanwhile, this discovered wine jug shows that the city was probably active, thriving with life during Akhenaten's times. That's huge. Up until now, there was no clear evidence that his radical ideas and projects extended all the way to the north. The jug also shows that vineyards and wine production reached all the way to the north in ancient Egypt. Wine really was a huge deal, worthy of placing a military base here. Princess Meritatan most likely used this jug. Just like with her brother, she was born into the sun and named after it. Her name, also spelled Meritatan, meant beloved of the Aten. As the eldest daughter of Pharaoh and his queen, born right into the middle of radical religious changes, she was raised to perform the future queen's duties. From her earliest years, she walked in temples alongside her mother Nefertiti, shaking the sistrum in solemn rituals. She was there when Akhenaten established his capital city, Amarna. He clearly loved his family. Meritatan's face was etched into its stone walls more than anyone else. In every temple, in every sacred scene, her figure appears, revered. Things get foggy in history after her father passed away. The throne wobbled. King Tut was very young, only 9 years old when he had to take new duties. Meritatan seemed to have been a brief step between her father and her younger brother. She married someone called Smenkhkare. History isn't even sure who that mysterious man was. Could have been a puppet, a phantom king in a crumbling dynasty. May have even been her brother. Whatever the truth was, these two took power and ruled together for a while. Meritatan got the title of the Great Royal Wife, a title of immense power. But Smenkhkare was a very short-lived ruler. He passed away just in about a year. There are some speculations among historians that Meritatan was the actual ruler, the informal female pharaoh, because her brother was too young. Some theories say that she raised Tutankhamun and became a sort of queen regent, mentoring the child who would be used to restore the old order. But all this is unconfirmed. It's very hard for historians to find information about that time because the Amarna period was later condemned. The successors wanted to wipe away Akhenaten's heresy and everything attached to it. This included Meritanaten. So even if she ruled, even if she mothered Tut, they tried to bury her in the sands of history. In any case, perhaps this new uncovered city will tell us more about the mysteries of the Amarna period, one of the most chaotic periods of ancient Egypt.
Scientists found an entire city of Gaiangola that was hidden beneath the dense jungles of Mexico for 600 years. It covers 360 hectares, had over 1,000 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, a network of internal roads, and a well-planned urban layout with temples and ball courts, and separate neighborhoods for the elites and commoners. For centuries, people believed there was just an abandoned fortress there, based on stories passed on from generation to generation. Until recently, there was no way to see how truly huge it was without spending years on the ground. But thanks to the new technology, a remote sensing tool called LiDAR, they got a 3D model of the area in just 2 hours from a plane. Gayangula was built between the years 1350 and 1521. It was a crucially important place for the Zapotec people, a group that had lived in the area since around 700 BCE. In Gayangula, families lived together in homes with big patios in the middle, surrounded by rooms. When families got bigger, they built more rooms and made their homes larger. The study found that both the leaders and regular people worked together to make the city better. Because Gayangula was surrounded by mountains, they used this land wisely and built their houses in a way that fit the slopes and let rainwater flow naturally. This helped keep their homes safe and strong. They were built so well that many of these buildings are still standing, even after hundreds of years. There are 2 pyramids in the center of the city. They may have been used as temples where the priests celebrated rites and ceremonies to their deities. The priests brought offerings to the altars, and the people assembled at the 2 squares that are now sunken. Then, there is also a palace with 64 rooms, some of them with circular columns on several sloped terraces. There are patios with many stairways all connected to each other. The sensing tool also found a round-shaped lookout point on a natural rock, where the Zapotec people could see their foes approaching from a distance. Researchers also noticed 2 circular structures that could have been used to watch the stars and measure time. They also found some tombs, so there was most definitely a city cemetery. By the end of the 1400s, the Zapotec people controlled a large territory on the Pacific coast and had successfully defended their land from the Aztecs, who were trying to take over more territory. They did the almost impossible and survived a 7-month-long siege at Gayangula. When they won this conflict and kept control of the southern part of Mesoamerica, the Zapotecs didn't need to live in Gayangula anymore. Staying in the mountains had its pros, but they needed fresh water and good farmland to grow food. The small city of Tehuantepec, just 12 miles away, had these conditions, so they moved there just before the Spanish arrived in 1521. Over time, Zapotec traditions started to fade, but their culture didn't disappear completely, and more than 300,000 Zapotec people still live in Oaxaca state in Mexico. They speak their own languages and keep their traditions alive. Creating the 3D model of the lost city is just the beginning of the research. Archaeologists hope that future studies of Gayangula will help us learn more about how the Zapotecs were organized, how they ruled their cities, and how they interacted with the Spanish when they arrived. They plan to study all 1,100 buildings found in the LiDAR scan, and it will take a few years. Instead of digging up the ruins, they will use special technology to scan the land and learn more about the city without damaging it. This same tech helped scientists find another massive ancient city that lay hidden beneath the thick green canopy of the Amazon forest. A whole network of houses, plazas, roads, and canals was hiding in the shadow of a mighty volcano. For centuries, many scientists assumed that ancient Amazonian people lived in tiny huts, clearing patches of land to survive. But this city, built 2,500 years ago and inhabited for 1,000 years, proves the opposite. Now, scientists think tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people lived in complex urban societies. Scanning the area found 6,000 rectangular platforms, each measuring around 66 by 33 feet, and standing 6 to 9 feet high. These structures were arranged in clusters around central plazas, with straight roads with perfect right angles and paths connecting them. One of the roads was 16 miles long. Building straight roads like this is far harder than just following the landscape. Some of these roads may have had deep spiritual or ceremonial significance. The volcano's rich soil helped the civilization thrive, but it may also have led to its downfall. Researchers also found signs of threats to the cities, such as ditches that block entrances to the settlements. Maybe some people living nearby were trying to get in. The next step for the researchers will be studying the adjoining 116 square miles to know more about this large, complex society that could be bigger than the well-known Mayan societies in Mexico and Central America. Meanwhile, in 1963, a man in Turkey discovered an ancient city while renovating his own house. He knocked down a wall in his basement and found a mysterious room. He kept digging and saw a tunnel. It led to the Derinkuyu underground city. It's one of the deepest multi-level underground settlements in Cappadocia and in all of Turkey. The inhabitants lived on 8 levels and had access to cellars, storage areas, chapels, a school, a study room, and other structures. All floors were connected by an extensive network of tunnels. The underground city was probably built as a shelter. The construction is hiding at 279 feet deep, and you can't see it from the outside. The complex was large enough to shelter about 20,000 people with their livestock and food supplies. There was also a 180-foot ventilation shaft. Archaeologists believe that Phrygians first built the levels. The Romans used and enhanced the structure later. The golden time of Derinkuyu was during the Byzantine era. The next lost and found city appeared only in a few inscriptions and ancient texts, so no one could be sure it really existed. Scientists searched the majority of the coast of Egypt until one archaeologist and his team detected a colossal face looking at them from under the water. The ancient city of Thonis Heraklion was discovered completely submerged 4 miles off Alexandria's coast. In the ruins of the lost city, there were 64 ships, 700 anchors, and a treasure trove of gold coins. Archaeologists believe the 16-foot-tall statue and the temple remains are the most important findings discovered by the expedition. Back then, the city had ceremonies and celebrations that took place in the Temple of Ammon. The ruins and artifacts were made from granite and diorite, so they were in good condition even after having been in contact with water for centuries. They give people a glimpse into what life was like 2,300 years ago in one of the most important trade ports of the world. The city had a network of canals, sort of like an ancient Egyptian Venice. The canals linked many separate harbors and anchorages. Towers, temples, houses, and other structures were also linked by bridges. Thonis Heraklion was the country's main port for international trade and the collection of taxes. No one really knows how the city ended up submerged, but archaeologists connect it with natural causes. At the end of the 2nd century BCE, most probably after a flood, it got covered with water. Then Alexandria, the city founded by Alexander the Great, became more glorious than Heraklion. Before Alexandria's fame, Heraklion was the main port of entry to Egypt. So after the tragedy, many ships heading for Heraklion had to change their route and go to Alexandria. Heraklion lost its glory until its discovery in 2000. The lost city of Atlantis may have actually been found. No, really. 2 researchers were working in the waters off the coast of Cuba when they discovered the ruins of what looked like an ancient submerged city. That happened about 20 years ago, and yet no one really talks about it today. It's like the authorities just took the research, locked it away in some top-secret room, and decided no one else should know about it. But why? Well, I'm going to tell you. Back in 2001, Paulina Zalitsky, a marine engineer, and her husband, Paul Weinswig, were hired to explore the waters off Cuba's western coast. They had 2 main objectives: to search for old shipwrecks, possibly hiding treasures like gold and jewels, and to locate valuable oil and natural gas deposits deep underwater. They were using a sonar. Basically, this equipment is like a sound-based radar. It sends out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something, like a sunken ship, they bounce back. The system can figure out where and how far the object is just by listening to the echo. So, the couple was scanning the seafloor with this equipment more than 2,000 feet below the surface. And then, out of nowhere, they found something way more interesting than gold or oil. They found stones. Not just any stones. I'm talking huge, perfectly arranged stones, kind of like a mini version of the pyramid at Chichen Itza, or even better, like a bunch of tiny submerged Chichen Itzas. Yep, they saw that, or at least they think they did. The thing is, sonar doesn't work like a camera. It definitely doesn't record video or take actual pictures underwater. What it does do is create images using sound. And those images are usually just outlines or shapes, kind of like a blurry black and white sketch. It shows you where things are, but not exactly what they look like. And that's exactly what happened back then. The equipment started producing images of these perfectly organized stone structures, and it really looked like some kind of urban development. I mean, the site was just too organized, too symmetrical to be just random rocks. But it sounded too good to be true. I mean, this discovery could totally change everything we know about ancient civilizations on the American continent. So the scientists decided it would be too irresponsible to announce anything without finding more evidence first. And that's why they decided to go back to that same spot. This time they sent down an underwater remotely operated vehicle to actually see what was going on beneath the sea. See? This robot was basically an underwater cameraman. And yep, it confirmed it. There was definitely something strange down there. It looked like an ancient city made of huge, smooth blocks of granite. These rocks were about 8 feet by 10 feet. Some were in pyramid shapes, others were circular. Some seemed to be deliberately cut and then stacked on top of each other, while others appeared isolated from the rest. Together, they looked like they were forming corridors and outlines of rooms. It was like finding large buildings in the middle of an underwater desert. These images were enough for Zalitsky to seal the deal. Back then, she confirmed that this amazing structure, her words, could have been a large urban center. Again, her words. Then the couple started to speculate. They said that these structures were probably built more than 6,000 years ago, which would make them older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt. It's even older than the famous Maya, the civilization that used to live in the Americas and is known for their ancient and advanced temples. The research also suggested that these structures might belong to a civilization that lived on the American continent thousands of years ago, and that we didn't even know about. This supposed civilization once thrived on a 100-mile land bridge connecting Cuba to Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. But then, something catastrophic happened. According to their theory, the Earth's faults shifted beneath the surface, leading to a massive earthquake. Then, in the blink of an eye, the entire bridge was destroyed. The land was swallowed up by the sea and ended up at the bottom of the ocean, and this civilization disappeared. Of course, all the connections to the famous Atlantis myth got the media totally hooked on the story. News websites ran headlines like "Lost City of the Caribbean Found" and "Atlantis Found in Cuba." So, could that really be Atlantis? I mean, did they finally find the remains of this supposedly super advanced and lost civilization? Well, it's hard to say. From the start, part of the scientific community wasn't buying into the story too much. First, there's the issue of the date. Saying that this civilization existed at this spot at least 6,000 years ago just wasn't very credible. Then, some European archaeologists argued that the stones they found using sonar might just be natural limestone, not perfectly sculpted granite. And third, it was too deep. Even with the whole theory of Earth faults opening up and swallowing everything, it's still hard to explain how an entire city ended up so deep in the ocean. For comparison, there is Heraklion, a real ancient Egyptian port city that got submerged. Today, it is only about 19 feet underwater. But this so-called Atlantis city is at depths between 2,000 and 2,460 feet. See how that's totally different, right? People think it would have taken around 50,000 years for such stone structures to sink to the depth where they are said to be found. And according to experts, none of the known civilizations from that long ago had the ability to build such structures. But for Zalitsky, yes, it was possible. She still believed in the fault theory to explain how this land ended up at the bottom of the ocean so fast. Big movements of the Earth's tectonic plates are usually followed by things like volcanoes and earthquakes. So, according to her, it's a powerful event, and the island sinking could have happened really quickly. This earthquake theory could also explain why some of the megaliths on the seafloor look organized while others don't. But to really prove any of this, they needed a specially designed robot to go down there again and take samples of the rocks and sediment. That way, they could figure out how old the rocks were and maybe even find signs of human life, like carvings, sculptures, or artifacts. The problem is, drilling into those structures isn't easy. They look like granite, and drilling granite that deep underwater is seriously tough. And more than anything, they needed money to do it, a lot of it. So maybe they just never got the funding. Because even with all that initial hype, no further explorations or studies were ever reported. And that lack of follow-up sparked a lot of speculation. Some people even wondered if the story got shut down on purpose, like maybe the authorities wanted to keep something top secret. As if this underwater city was built by some kind of higher extraterrestrial being, and they just don't want us to find out. But truth be told, the strongest argument for saying, yeah, that is definitely a lost city, is that nature supposedly couldn't have built something so symmetrical. Geologists did try to find natural explanations, or at least similar examples from other parts of the world, but they came up short. Still, just because we haven't found a clear natural explanation doesn't mean there isn't one. Nature can create some pretty wild and unexpected stuff, so honestly, that whole too perfect to be natural angle is kind of a weak argument. What most likely happened is that experts just weren't convinced it was actually a sunken city, and that's probably why no one followed up on their work. Over time, the buzz faded, the story disappeared, and the site slipped back into silence. And without more data, the true nature of those underwater formations off Cuba's coast is still a mystery. 1,000 years ago, near modern-day St. Louis, Missouri, there was a vibrant, bustling city called Cahokia. It was a Native American city, the largest and most influential one in Mississippian culture. At its peak, around 1050 BCE, Cahokia was home to as many as 30,000 people, making it larger than Paris at the time. But what's interesting is that Cahokia didn't have any big marketplace. Usually trade was the backbone of any big city, yet this one stood out for archaeologists. That's because Cahokia wasn't about commerce. It was about culture, community, and parties. The people who lived there threw massive parties that would last for days. The city's grandest feature was its 50-acre plaza, surrounded by amazing earthen pyramids. This massive space could hold over 10,000 people. Imagine them all gathering there for festivities, dancing, drinking coffees and teas, feasting on deer, and betting on sports. The events were super lively. Cahokians would wear awesome costumes, style their hair in interesting ways, and decorate their bodies with tattoos. Athletes were playing a game called Chunky, where they hurled spears at a rolling stone disc, competing to get as close as possible. The roar of the crowd filled the air, and performers showed off their skills. These celebrations were so wild, they left traces in history. After the parties ended, Cahokians cleaned up by tossing leftovers into pits. Archaeologists have uncovered these waste pits, and they were filled with food remains and pottery. One pit alone contained the remains of 2,000 deer, and that's from a single event. They also found traces of yaupon holly, a caffeinated plant that was traded from hundreds of miles away. This just shows how much effort and thought Cahokians put in their celebrations. Would you like to live in a city like this? But aside from all the fun and games, Cahokia was also deeply complex and spiritual. The city was built on a landscape that mixed dry land with swampy patches. Many people believe that this symbolized the connection between the world of the living and the dead. The people of Cahokia saw their city as a bridge between these two realms. They built earthen mounds, both for ceremonies and rituals, and as construction support. These mounds rose from the swampy areas. Meanwhile, people settled in the drier spots. Elevated pathways connected these neighborhoods, creating a physical link between life and death. Isn't it sad that some ancient metropolises that rival modern cities in scale just disappeared? Cahokia's story came to a quiet end around 1350 CE, when the city was abandoned, all due to changes in environments and weather, floods, and other problems. But the influence of Cahokia was so big, it spread to distant places. Some of their traditions, like Chunky and Yaupan tea, have survived in native communities to this day. Today, Cahokia is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's not the only megacity we lost. About 5,000 years ago, people in the Indus Valley built some of the world's first cities. Mohenjo-Daro was an ancient city in what is now Pakistan. The city was built around 2500 BCE, and back then, it was a thriving hub of the Indus civilization. Sure, it was much smaller than modern cities, but it was quite huge at the time, around 40,000 inhabitants. It looks like the locals were crazily strict and disciplined people. The city's planning and organization were incredible. It was laid out in a grid pattern. Streets and important buildings aligned along the north-south axis, probably to match the movement of the sun and moon. They also built one of the most advanced systems for water and waste management of their time. The city had about 700 wells. Nearly every house had its own. Most homes also had private bathrooms with drainages and even underground sewers. This shows how skilled these people were at staying clean. And with all this discipline, it looks like there were no kings, queens, or even a central government. They could still have some authority, like local elites or elected officials, just not a classic strict monarchy or religion. Instead, people there cared about simplicity and order. They basically managed themselves, having standardized ways of doing things, from the way tools and potteries were made to how they traded. Which is why, unlike many other cities, Mohenjo-Daro didn't have grand palaces, temples, or monuments. Instead, they had public areas known as citadels. People gathered at citadels for rituals, meetings, and storage of grain. And it seems like this way of life worked perfectly. Scientists found some seals and weights, which means the economy was well regulated. Archaeologists found some intricate artifacts like ivory, lapis lazuli, carnelian beads, and gold jewelry. Another famous find is the small bronze statue known as the Dancing Girl, which was discovered in 1926. Mohenjo-Daro wasn't poor at all. And they also pulled off some awesome buildings. Staying clean was clearly way more important to them than displays of wealth or power. So they created the Great Bath, one of the most famous structures in the city. It's a large, watertight pool built with baked bricks, perched on a mound of earth, being almost a religious place, the closest thing they had to a temple. Meanwhile, the city itself was built on a series of mounds. They grew taller over the centuries as people added new houses and structures. Why did the city fail? No one really knows. There's something mysterious about the sculptures archaeologists found. Many of them seemed intentionally broken. This means the city's later inhabitants, maybe invaders or something, destroyed them for some reason. Some scientists think that the Indus River may have shifted course, disrupting agriculture and trade. But there's no evidence of a flood or any big event like this. It just seems like, over time, the entire Indus civilization just gradually faded away. By 1900 BCE, the culture had shifted and didn't leave much behind. Let me tell you now about the ancient city of Kos, which is located where the modern town of Kos now stands in Greece. Imagine arriving by sea, and the first thing that hits you is the sheer grandeur of its agora, This massive public square, built with stones in different colors, laid out on terraces that rise above you. It was one of the biggest in the ancient world, and it made a great impression on anyone approaching the city. This place has a rich history, dating back to around 2300 to 2200 BCE. A long time ago, local folk gathered up from different parts of the island to form a new city in the northeast. People have lived there since the Bronze Age, and over time, it became a super important center of culture and trade. And no wonder, since it's right near a natural harbor. The harbor was sheltered by two breakwaters, and people built some of the most important religious sites there, including the sanctuaries of Aphrodite and Hercules. Kos wasn't just beautiful, though. It had some brilliant design. The whole city was laid out in a neat grid, with streets crossing each other at perfect right angles, literally looking almost like a modern city. Thanks to this, moving around was super easy, and the blocks, or insulae, were big enough to fit several large houses. Kos remained largely unchanged until the 6th century CE. Over time, it started gradually shrinking in size, confined within the walls of what is now the Chora neighborhood. Meanwhile, Palmyra was an ancient city built around a beautiful oasis sometime around the 3rd millennium BCE. Originally known as Tadmor, this city flourished as a major stop on the Silk Road, linking the Near East with Asia. It was a thriving center of trade and culture. They had a marketplace, assembly buildings, grand gates. In other words, this place was bustling with life. The city has been through many hands throughout its history, from the Byzantine to Arab caliphates, which is probably why it had some awesome architecture. An interesting blend of Greco-Roman, Persian, and Arabic vibes. The Temple of Bel, the Great Colonnade, and a Roman-style theater. But, like all the others, it decayed over time. Palmyra's importance faded, and by the early 1400s, it had been largely destroyed. But at least its ruins remained. Right now, they're a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Back in the 12th and 13th centuries, Bologna used to look like modern-day Manhattan. No one knows exactly how many towers resembling skyscrapers it used to have, but the most likely number is at least 100. The tallest of them was around the same height as Big Ben. When the towers were built, Bologna was one of the largest cities in Europe. Construction projects were massive and ambitious. Someone built cathedrals and town halls, and the richest noble families also erected towers, possibly as a symbol of status and wealth. There was no place in the city center to build grand castles, so they had to go up with the construction. They didn't actually live in those towers, but in smaller structures next to them. The towers served for defensive purposes. It took between 3 and 10 years of work to build one tower, and it was a really tedious process. Each of them had a steady foundation deep underground and a base made of big blocks of selenite stone. The rest of the tower was becoming thinner and lighter the higher it went. In the 13th century, they demolished many of the towers, and others just collapsed by themselves. Some of them were later reused as city towers, shops, or residential buildings. Now you can see only 22 towers still standing in the center of Bologna. 2 of them have become the unofficial symbol of the city, mentioned in every guidebook. Another historical surprise coming from Italy is that gladiators weren't only male. Gladiatrix were rare, but they did exist. There's evidence that several women took part in Rome's public games. In ancient texts, these women were often called ludia, or mulieres, but not ladies. Some scholars think it means that it was mostly lower-class women in the arena. The term gladiatrix wasn't used in ancient times. It was first coined in the 1800s. Women who chose to become gladiators seemed to do so for independence, fame, financial rewards, and probably debt remission. They were most likely honored like male gladiators. All this was a bit tricky to accept in Roman society at that time, and women's roles in it. At the beginning of the current era, the Roman Senate passed a law prohibiting free-born women under 20 from taking part in arena games. Emperor Septimus Severus banned all women from the arena in the year 200 of the current era. He was probably afraid that women might want to compete in the Olympic Games. It would seriously mess up the existing social order. Pineapples were once the equivalent of designer bags and watches today, a symbol of wealth and status in Britain. You can still see them at the top of the western towers of St. Paul's Cathedral, one of the most famous landmarks of London. Explorers who came back from the Americas described pineapples with so much enthusiasm that everyone was dreaming about trying the king of fruits, as it was called. Pineapples need very high temperatures and years to mature. And despite the cold and rainy climate of England and Scotland, you could see pineapples growing in any wealthy country house garden by the end of the 18th century. They even installed special greenhouses called pineries with heating systems. A single pineapple was worth up to 80 pounds, which is about $15,000 today. Of course, people would hardly eat this expensive beauty, but send it as a gift or display on a dining table until it would rot. Folks who couldn't afford to buy a pineapple would sometimes rent one to show off wealth at a party. The king of fruits became a part of various designs and tableware for the rich. Stone pineapples on gateposts and the pineapple atop the Wimbledon trophy are living memories of that time. Around 1820, there were so many pineapples imported from abroad that they started losing their luxury status. 100 million years ago, there were giant crocodiles living in the Sahara Desert. In the 1990s, paleontologists found fossilized skeletons of primitive crocodiles, including the so-called supercroc. They discovered several partial skeletons from 110 million years ago. This prehistoric giant with a head as large as an adult human was about 40 feet long. That's about 2 times as tall as a giraffe. The croc thrived both in water and on land as part of a diverse ecosystem of ancient North Africa. The expeditions to the Sahara found a whole lost world of ancient crocodiles, with some species that resembled modern animals. One of them was the dog croc. With its tall legs and keen sense of smell, it moved through the surroundings much like a dog. Another fascinating find was the duck croc, a 3-foot-long crocodile with duck-billed platypus-like features. It was adapted for life on land rather than water. And then there was also the rat croc, a small 2-foot-long crocodile. This species had front teeth, perfect for digging up insects. These prehistoric creatures were more agile, active, and probably more intelligent than today's crocs, who are passive hunters. If noise-canceling headphones had been invented in the 19th century, they would have come in really handy. On the 27th of August 1883, the island of Krakatoa in Indonesia experienced a catastrophic eruption. It produced what is believed to be the loudest sound ever recorded. As Krakatoa collapsed, it triggered tsunamis with waves reaching 151 feet that traveled as far as South Africa. Krakatoa was an uninhabited volcanic island that hadn't erupted for 2 centuries before this terrible day. The eruption took the lives of over 30,000 people and caused extreme fluctuations in air pressure, perceived as sound. A barometer at a gasworks 100 miles from Krakatoa recorded 172 decibels. An average human can withstand up to 130 decibels of sound without getting in serious trouble. This intense pressure ruptured the eardrums of sailors on the British ship Norham Castle, which was 40 miles away from Krakatoa. The sound wave from it circled the globe, and people could still hear it even 3,000 miles away where it resembled cannon fire. The late 1800s were a golden era for grand mustaches. But there was one problem. You couldn't enjoy a cup of tea with this kind of facial hairstyle. The heat from the tea would melt mustache wax and make the ends droop. Fine gentlemen had to struggle because of it until the invention of the mustache cup. Harvey Adams, a British potter, likely invented the mustache cup in the 1870s. He patented a butterfly-shaped ledge inside the cup with a hole to sip through. Thanks to it, the mustache didn't get wet. These cups quickly became a hit, first in the UK and then across Europe. In the United States, they were sold at stores like Sears and Marshall Field's, now part of Macy's. Mustache cups came in various shapes and sizes. Some, like farmers' cups, could hold up to a pint of tea. Others were smaller porcelain pieces shaped like conch shells or decorated with the owner's name. They often came with matching saucers. Lord Byron, one of the greatest British poets, kept numerous dogs and cats and a whole bunch of exotic animals. There was a monkey, a crocodile, a fox, peacocks, a bear, and several badgers. When Byron attended Trinity College, Cambridge, college rules prohibited keeping dogs on the grounds. He got really angry and decided to go around the rules. Byron brought a tame bear as his pet. The college authorities argued with him, but since the statutes did not specifically mention bears, they had no legal grounds to remove either the bear or its owner. Byron walked the bear on a chain, talked to it, and even considered applying for the bear to become a student at the college. We still don't know how and where Byron got the bear, but when he left Cambridge, he took the bear with him to his estate in London.
So, you've probably heard of the mythical city of Atlantis. But did you know there's a real Atlantis of the sands? In 1992, a group of amateur researchers and archaeologists got curious about a lost city called Ubar, supposedly hidden in the deserts of Oman. According to legends and ancient texts, Ubar vanished because a deity got angry with the city's ruler. For centuries, no one could find it, and it became more myth than reality. That is, until a likely duo, a lawyer and a filmmaker, teamed up with NASA. They used a special radar system that could see through the thick desert sands and discovered ancient trade routes, compacted by the movement of thousands of camels. Ooh, imagine how that smelled. Anyway, this led them to the remains of Ubar, a bustling center for trading frankincense 5,000 years ago, a substance once as valuable as gold. This information was all they needed to get boots on the ground and start exploring the area. A group of over 40 volunteers removed 200 tons of sand from the site. They found something big, but it really didn't look like a city. Most Arabs in the past didn't live in traditional dwellings. They tended to live in open-sided tents that allowed the cooling breezes to pass through. But at the center of the tent city, there was a fortress that was the king's home. The fortress they found was ringed by 8 walls, each about 2 feet thick, 10 to 12 feet high, and about 60 feet long. At each corner stood a tower roughly 10 feet in diameter and 30 feet tall, exactly as it was described in that ancient religious text. Now, what the king who built it didn't know is that he built his impenetrable fortress on top of a highly corrosive limestone cavern. With time, the layer of ground above the fortress gave way to a sinkhole, and the whole thing swallowed the fortress all the way. Sinkholes happen when underground water starts to erode the bedrock, making the soil very unstable and fragile. Having a city on top of that certainly doesn't help. The whole thing just went kaboom one fine day, and we only found out about it recently. Yow! Meanwhile, Santorini is known for its stunning views and romantic getaways. But it's also home to one of the most fascinating archaeological sites in the world, the ancient city of Atrotiri. Dating back over 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, Atrotiri was a Bronze Age hub. That is, until it was wiped out by a volcanic eruption. Everything changed for Atrotiri in the 16th century BCE, when a series of earthquakes hit the city. The city lay buried under volcanic ash, much like Pompeii. The exact date of the eruption is still debated, although there are some clues found in unusual tree ring patterns from years like 1597 and 1560 BCE. Now, it seems as though the residents of the city quickly packed up and left, and good thing they did, because what followed was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in the last 4,000 years. The ash was so thick that the city remained hidden for thousands of years. You see, the Akrotiri civilization was known for its monumental architecture and fantastic art. being sometimes called the first civilization in Europe. It flourished during the Bronze Age, and they grew so much because they were an important part of the copper trade. The civilization saw over 500 years of wealth and prosperity. They expanded so much, their cities had extensive drainage systems, and their people produced high-quality pottery, according to what researchers found in later excavations. Fast forward to 1867, when locals started stumbling upon ancient artifacts of this civilization in a quarry. These findings first caught the attention of a French geologist who did the first digs. But it wasn't until modern excavations that the true scale of the lost city was revealed. As archaeologists dug deeper, they discovered a sophisticated settlement. Akrotiri was a key trading hub between Crete and Cyprus, with evidence of copper, pottery, and paved streets. It was a bustling, organized city, until that devastating volcano wiped it off the map. What's left today are stunning remnants of their culture, like beautifully preserved frescoes. These paintings, created with mineral pigments, show scenes of daily life, flotilla of boats, blooming flowers, and birds in flight. Across the Atlantic, Peru is world-famous for the majestic ruins of Machu Picchu. But there's a lesser-known, heartbreaking chapter in its history, the tragic destruction of the city of Jungay. In 1970, a seemingly small shift in a tectonic plate triggered a massive 7.9 magnitude earthquake, causing devastation on a scale few could have imagined. It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon when the regions of Uncas and La Libertada were rocked by the quake. The epicenter was about 22 miles off the coast, where the Nazca Plate dives, or subducts, under the South American plate. It affected an area of roughly 83,000 square kilometers, larger than Belgium and the Netherlands combined. The tremors were so powerful, they were even felt in central and western Brazil, which are not exactly close by, just to give you an idea. Although many towns were affected, Jungay was affected the most. The beautiful Mount Osakaram, towering over the city, turned evil when the earthquake triggered an enormous avalanche. A mass of glacial ice and rock, about 3,000 feet wide and a mile long, came barreling down the mountain at over 100 miles per hour. It roared down the slopes, gathering mud, rocks, and debris as it raced toward the city, obliterating everything in its path. In just minutes, the avalanche traveled over 8 miles and buried Jungay under tons of snow and mud. Over 25,000 people lost their lives in the disaster, leaving the city almost completely covered. Peruvian officials have since declared the place a national mourning area, forbidding any excavations out of respect for those who perished. What's even more astonishing is that a few people managed to find refuge in a nearby resting place on a small hill. Some say that the town's fate had been foretold years before by a priest who warned about living in the shadow of such an unstable mountain. There's no way to confirm this, but it remains a part of local legend. Now, as strange as it may sound, this American city is sitting at the bottom of the man-made Lake Shasta, and how it got there is what matters most here. Once, the city of Kinnett in California had 40 saloons, dozens of stores, a hotel, hospital, a school, and an opera house. Today, it rests as deep as 400 feet below the water surface. In the beginning, the city of Kinnett was a mining community. The town started to spark attention in 1852 when it was announced that gold was found in the area. Kinnett was also very close to the Southern Pacific Railroad, so it was a hotspot for businessmen, railroad workers, and the thousands of mining men that worked in the surrounding mines. At its peak, Kinnett boasted a population of 10,000 people. Apparently, the city grew too big, too fast, and its economy couldn't handle it. In 1923, Kinnett's largest mine closed permanently, and that was just the excuse the officials needed. Authorities wanted to build a dam in the nearby region, so in 1935, they started working on the Shasta Dam. When Shasta Lake began filling up with water in 1940, the old town's hotel and saloon still existed and were left standing. Today, all of its remaining structure sits in the deepest part of Shasta Lake. Now, here's the craziest part. During a recent California drought, some parts of the town that were taken by the lake's water started to reveal itself. After almost a century underwater, old bridges, train trestles, tunnels, and the town's foundations started to pop out of the lake's muddy depths.
You are lost deep within the jungle in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There are strange noises all around you, and to make it worse, the sun is setting. Soon, you'll be alone in the middle of an unknown rainforest. Guess it was a pretty bad idea to come looking for El Dorado on your own, wasn't it? You keep walking as fast as you can when suddenly, wait! What's this you're seeing? It looks like large stairways made out of stone. This definitely doesn't look natural, so you take a picture. Maybe you didn't strike gold, but you might have just found something relevant. Congratulations! You found Ocumtun, a long-lost Mayan city. Hidden 37 miles into the jungle, the name literally translates to stone column. Stone was probably in at the time, so these guys used a lot of it to build their pyramids, houses, and even ball courts. If you ever thought that Europeans invented ball games, think twice. Mayans love to play ball games for recreational purposes. Ocumtun is part of a series of other long-lost Mayan cities that are being discovered with the help of new technology nowadays. We'll talk more about the other ones in a jiffy. Perhaps the biggest surprise of this one is that it was surrounded by wetlands, which is why the city was built on high ground. The city was monumental, covering an area of over 120 acres. That would be as big as 90 football fields right next to each other. Scientists have found proof that Ocumtun had pyramids of up to 49 feet high, and that it was likely an important social hub between 250 and 1000 CE. This is definitely a game changer. But lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the 19th century. Modern technologies, such as LiDAR imaging, help archaeologists see through dense canopies of the forests. This means that people don't really have to risk getting lost in the tropical jungle like you did at the beginning of this video. LiDAR works sort of like an X-ray. It sends out laser beams that can detect any signs of ruins or ancient constructions. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parchak, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in South America, Egypt, and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any signs of where there could have been cities long ago. She says that more often than not, what happens is that ruins are covered by vegetation, soil, or sand, which makes them super tricky to find. But thanks to these awesome tools, scientists also made the huge discovery of ancient Mayan causeways, which spread throughout old Mayan territories. I mean, take a look at these roadways. You'd expect to see ruins like this in places such as Portugal, England, or the United States. I'm talking about 130 feet wide roads painted white to help travelers journey through the nighttime. Scientists recently unearthed a 110-mile network of roads such as these, and they think this dates back to before the first registered Mayan highways we've known so far. These roadways, which sometimes ran over the swampy ground and were even elevated at times, are being called the world's first superhighways. Even if there is no registry of animal-powered vehicles, it's believed that the Maya used them to travel around a network of possible 964 settlements. They were built like a huge spiderweb, and from what archaeologists have gathered, this huge system of roads worked to connect a big system of economic and social interactions between Mayan cities. This completely debunks the traditional idea that the Mayan pre-classic period, which dates back to 2000 BCE, was made of small, tribal settlements. Imagine the manpower and engineering ability you need to muster to build something close to these white highways. Scientists believe that these causeways were built pretty much the same way as the Mayans built their pyramids, with a mixture of mud and quarry stone. Oh, and using several layers of limestone to make them white. That's pretty cool, right? But let's take a few steps back for a moment to get some context. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. Until now, Experts believe that at its apex, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities with a population of millions of people. That's a lot of folks. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. And they survived mainly on agriculture. The thing is, the Yucatan Peninsula was an extremely difficult place to grow crops. So the Mayans had to develop a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, and plazas. The Mayans might have been keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets such as Venus and Mars, as well as the exact dates of eclipses. If you've ever seen examples of ancient Mayan cities, this is Tikal. Located at the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan conquest state. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It's composed of a series of complex monuments. The North Acropolis is one of Tikal's most ancient complexes of monuments. Built solely by human hands around 350 BCE, it served as the resting place of kings and chiefs. Its monuments are up to 200 feet high. Back in the day, the step pyramid temples were painted a beautiful red. Mayans loved that color. Today, of course, you'll only see the limestone. Then there's Chichen Itza. It's got one of the best preserved pyramids on Earth to date. Located in Mexico's Yucatan state, this Mayan city is well over 1,500 years old. At its peak, it was home to 35,000 people. The site covers 4 square miles of land. The highlight is El Castillo, a tremendous step-like temple standing 80 feet above ground. Its most peculiar feature is that it has 91 steps up each of its 4 sides, including the upper platform, which makes for 365 steps, the same number of days as the solar year. You can see that these folks were a pretty big deal, huh? That's why nobody can really understand what happened to them. There's a big lack of evidence on the decline of this almighty empire. What could have been the cause of their demise? Was it a drought? New research in 2017 did bring some new discoveries into the mix. Using data from a site at Ceibal, located at southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the unexpected demise of this great civilization. The information shows that instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely fell in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. It's hard to pinpoint the exact causes, though. But hey, recent discoveries are shedding a big light on humanity's past. Not only about the Mayan Empire, but about other long-lost civilizations of South America. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done using satellite imaging technology and is also shocking scientists. Some images from near the Xingu River, also in the Amazon, suggest that cities of millions of people might have existed inside the jungle, way before our modern civilization ever existed. I mean, if this doesn't shock you, I don't know what will. Satellite imagery also detected a network of trenches, dating back to 200 and 1200 CE in the Bolivian Amazon forest. These proofs suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people right in the middle of the Amazon forest. When researchers from the University of Florida went on ground to check the satellite information, they were shocked to find several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans.
Let's do a thought experiment together, shall we? Now imagine you're climbing the Himalayas. However, you're lost. Where you are seems to be an isolated valley. You used all your food and water source and don't know which way to go. You're so out of energy that you don't even know if you'll be able to get back home. Suddenly, in the distance, you see a sage-looking man walking towards you. However, you can't help but to close your eyes as you are defeated by fatigue. You open your eyes to a totally new place. The sage is sitting right next to you. He says,
"Hello, traveler, and welcome to the land of immortals."
That sounds like the beginning of an Indiana Jones movie, right? But what if I told you that such a place actually is said to exist, according to some legends, beliefs, and ancient texts? Indian Tibetan texts mention a place called Gyangai, also known as Shambhala or Shangri-La, depending on different cultures. This legendary city is the home of immortal beings and is a land of spiritual enlightenment. Take one of its names, Shambhala, for example. It literally means the source of happiness in the Sanskrit language. So, accordingly, you would expect this celestial kingdom to be surrounded by all things of great beauty and wonder, with gardens and other mighty and majestic structures. The ancient beliefs and myths state that when you enter Gyangai, you will immediately be reminded of the structure of a lotus flower with 8 petals. The place is surrounded by mountains covered with snow. It has beautiful waterfalls, crowning into a pure and divine lake, and its water has extremely strong therapeutic powers. The whole place is illuminated by milky white light at all times, and this is neither due to the sun nor the moon. There are also phosphoric plants that can give desired light on voice commands. 100 types of other delightful flowers keep blooming all year round in its gardens, in addition to countless trees where delicious fruits grow. But one tree is known to be the most special one, and that is the tree of immortality, or the tree of life. Described as a shimmering crystal, it stands at the center of Gyangai and unites the skies, the earth, and the underworld. The fruits of it resemble an abstract form of Sri Yantra, a mystical diagram used in Hinduism, which consists of 9 interlocking triangles. However, nobody is allowed to take these fruits out of Gyangai itself. The only way to do it is if you get permission from the inhabitants of the city. This brings us to the question of who lives in this magical and mystical city. According to the legends, Gyangai is inhabited by a great number of advanced masters, or in other words, sages, who subtly guide the destiny of the world through meditation. They are eternal beings who are not affected by any human desires or sorrows. Their duty is to protect the spiritual teachings of the world and work for the good of humanity, as well as all conscious beings. It's also believed that during a time of great chaos in the world, the 25th ruler of this Gyangai will appear among them to lead the planet to a better future. These sages and eternal beings who live there are somehow also the protectors of Gyangai. So, if you were thinking of just casually walking into this place with a map in your hands, sorry to inform you, but that's not happening. First of all, no one really knows where exactly Gyangai is. Some people believe it's in a remote valley in the Himalayas. Some claim it's in a hidden cave. There are also people who think it's on a mountain range, and others suspect it's on a secluded plateau. So, the location of the city is a mystery and seems like it will stay that way, since it is also said that the immortal sages who live in Gyangai camouflage the valley from humans by creating some kind of an energy field. So, Google Maps can't help you with it either. That's why some even suggest, including the Dalai Lama, that it exists in a different plane of reality altogether. In some of the ancient texts, there are actually a few instructions on how to access Gyangai. However, the directions are said to be incomprehensible, the way I get sometimes. But let's pretend for a second that you did crack the instructions, and the immortal beings living there were willing to grant you entrance. Unfortunately, you still might not be able to enter this cosmic city, and here's why. It is believed that only enlightened masters or sages who have a certain karmic connection with it will be able to reach there. So, what do the eternal beings of such a magical place do there? Remember, they have all the time in their hands. The ancient texts state that Gyangai has a center and 16 areas that are all meant for 16 different sciences to be studied. These include solar sciences, universal planetary sciences, sciences related to time, the science of air, the science related to the sun and the moon, the science related to space, the science related to gravitational forces, and so on. What they all have in common is that to be able to learn them, you first need to have a very high understanding of energy. The level of courses that are studied is extremely advanced, and these teachings are still unknown even in these modern times. Each scientific system has different departments, and all these departments have their respective teachers. Since time doesn't work as we understand there, and immortality is possible, most of these teachers are hundreds or even thousands of years old. They can stay in their spiritual bodies, which appear like a mass of bright light, while their physical bodies remain separate. What a school, huh? It almost makes Hogwarts seem boring. And does anybody actually graduate from there? Of course, all these stories and mysteries about Gyanganj have attracted many people from all around the world. Countless attempts to find this land of immortality and spiritual awakening have been made by mountaineers and trekkers, including President Franklin Roosevelt himself. But as you might have guessed, they led to nothing. Still, there were a few people, like renowned spiritual leaders, sages, and adventure seekers, who claimed they had visited it. One of them was Sri Gopinath Kaviraj, a celebrated scholar, who was the first person in modern times to have allegedly found the place. After his supposed visit to Gyanganj, he wrote a book about it and made the place popular in modern culture. Upon reading his book, many other enthusiastic foreign scholars rushed into Tibet to learn more about it, as well as try to find it. Another person who claimed to have been there was a mountaineer who got lost in the Himalayas. According to his story, after getting lost, he was feeling hungry, so he accidentally consumed poisoned mushrooms. Feeling completely disoriented by them, he stumbled upon a mountain with a gap, which was covered by fog. Then he fell inside. After getting back up to his feet, he realized that he was surrounded by people dressed in strange clothes who tended to his wounds. After he was fully healed, they escorted him out of the city. Then there was the spiritual leader, Guru Sai Kaka, who revealed to the world about his not one but many visits to Gyanganj. As per his narration, he claimed to go there, seeking spiritual and immortal teachings. He stated that a sage escorted him into the city every time he visited the place. In his stories, he also pointed out that the kingdom exists in a higher dimension. One other so-called visitor to Gyanganj was L.P. Farrell, an English officer, who claimed to have experienced the mystical place in 1942. Even if all these stories and descriptions about Gyanganj are able to give us a vivid picture, it can still be hard for many to keep an open mind about its existence. Yet again, it's not hard to admit that even the idea of such a place, where immortality is possible and truly moral beings are working to protect humanity, is comforting, mind-blowing, and fascinating. So, imagine you're 15 and you get bored of playing video games. Instead, to pass the time, you decide to give some attention to an old hobby of yours, tracking down lost Mayan cities. You've heard that some ancient civilizations are said to have built entire cities based on constellations, so you decide to check out whether that was true for the Mayans. You find a book containing all the constellations the Mayan civilization believed to exist. You open good old Google Maps and map every ancient Mayan city discovered to date. You start seeing that this information actually matches. And truly, the biggest ancient Mayan cities correspond to the brightest and biggest stars of the Mayan constellations. Okay, this is getting interesting. You manage to map out over 100 ancient cities when you suddenly notice something strange. There's an area in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico where archaeologists have unearthed 2 Mayan cities. But on the constellation map, there are 3 stars. Could this mean there is a long-lost city waiting to be discovered nearby? You might think this sounds too daydreaming, but the story is actually true. The previous account happened to a Canadian teenager named William Gaddery. The boy is known as a science genius and had even won an award for the constellation theory we presented just now. When he noticed that a 3rd city was missing from the 23rd constellation he was examining, he began to scour the internet for satellite pictures that could help him solve this mystery. He looked into images from NASA, JAXA, a Japan-based satellite company, and Google Earth. These images were still insufficient to answer his questions, so he reached out to a friend inside the Canadian Space Agency. His friend provided him with state-of-the-art satellite imagery that gave him the answer he was looking for. According to the images, there is a large square area right on the border of Mexico and Belize, which looks like the remains of a city. William took the images to a remote sensing expert known as Dr. Armand Larocque from the University of New Brunswick. They studied the images thoroughly and concluded that the area could be housing 30 buildings and even a large pyramid. The scientific and archaeological community went crazy with the 15-year-old's discovery. Could this really be true? Some background. Lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the mid-20th century. Since then, ruins from cities such as Tikal, Palenque, and Uxmal have been rediscovered. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. They began to settle in the area as early as 1500 BCE. Experts believe that, at its height, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities, with a population of millions of people. That's a crowd. And their cities were pretty interesting. Their civilization spanned over Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. They survived mainly on agriculture, so they developed a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, plazas, and even courts for ball games. The Mayans were keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets, such as Venus and Mars, and they were able to predict the exact dates of eclipses. That's why the methodology William used to discover this long-lost Mayan city was unusual, but not completely surreal. The Mayans were keen astronomers, so it wouldn't be too strange that they built their major architectural feats in relation to the sky, would it? And they wouldn't be the first ones to be doing so. There is a famous fringe of Egyptology dedicated to studying how the Giza pyramids were built in perfect alignment with the Orion constellation, meaning that each pyramid was purposely built to align with one of the major stars of Orion's belt. According to William, he first had the idea to look at the Mayan constellations because he couldn't understand why the Mayans built their cities where they built them. Most major cities, such as Chichen Itza and Uxmal, aren't near any rivers or significant bodies of water. Instead, they're built on marginal lands and on top of mountains, which confused the 15-year-old. His next thought was that it might have something to do with astronomy. William named the new city he discovered Mouth of Fire, which is also my nickname, and he even won a merit award for his hard work. However, his theory was very much contested inside the archaeological community, and many Mayan experts worked to debunk William's findings. Some archaeologists say that constellation theories are too unscientific. Anthony Aveni, a renowned anthropologist and astronomer, referred to William's methodology as an act of creative imagination. He explained that there is no way to be sure what the Mayan constellations really were. It's all just hypothetical. Another debunking of William's findings came from Mayanist David Stewart, who said that the object identified on the satellite imagery is nothing but an old cornfield. His claim was supported by an expedition that took place near the area in 2021, when the archaeologists present reported there was nothing at all in this area. Still, a 15-year-old boy almost found a long-lost Mayan city, which is pretty exciting if you ask me. Similar techniques as those used by William are actually being used to unearth lost civilizations all over the world. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parquet, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in Egypt and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any sign of where there could have been cities long ago. What happens, she says, is that any time you have something buried, it's going to be covered either by vegetation, soil or sand, or some other modern construction on top of it. In order to assess whether there is something hidden under large canopies of vegetation or not, she uses infrared technology, for instance. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done in a similar way. Satellite imagery detected a network of trenches dating back to 200 to 1200 CE. These suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people. But in this case, the satellite imagery did indeed correspond to what was on the ground. Researchers from the University of Florida found several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls, centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans. Advances in satellite tech have also shed new light on long-discovered ancient Mayan cities, such as Tikal. Located in the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It was composed of a series of complex monuments, many of them believed to have been the resting places of kings and chiefs. Tikal is already known to have been big, but recent discoveries show it could have been even 3 times larger than what scientists originally believed. The main discovery revolves around a fortification on the outskirts of the city, indicating how far the original city stretched. And new discoveries still take place. In 2017, researchers also unearthed new clues regarding the potential causes of the decline of the Mayan civilization. Using data from a site in Cebu located 62 miles southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the sudden demise of this great civilization. The information shows that, instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely collapsed in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. Well, it seems like it's a prime time to uncover ancient ruins. What do you say? Will you give it a try as well?